as a self-aggrandizing charlatan. The genesis of the book dates back to the mid-1980s, when I was working as a feature writer for the Sunday Times magazine. Hubbard had literally dropped out of sight years earlier. No one knew where he was hiding or whether he was dead or alive. He was being pursued by federal investigators and law officers, but none unearthed a single clue as to his whereabouts. I suggested to the editor of the magazine that we should try and find him. If we succeeded, we would have a worldwide scoop. If we failed, we would have an even greater mystery. I had some little success and was pretty sure he was living in the region of San Luis Obispo in California. But then, in January 1986, it was announced that L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, had died. I had already decided at that point to write a book about his life. Very early on in my research, a disaffected Scientologist I was interviewing in California casually asked me if I was being followed. I was taken aback. I knew the Church of Scientology was antagonistic towards my project, but it had not occurred to me for a moment that anyone would go to the time and trouble, not to mention the expense, of tracking my movements. Initially, I scoffed at the idea, but I quickly discovered that I was being followed. Every day. At the time, I was living with my family in a rented house in Pacific Palisades. The house was in a cul-de-sac, so it was very easy to pick me up as I drove away each morning. For a while, I wondered if I was simply being paranoid, but then I was followed by a bright red sports car with prominent red wing mirrors. It stopped when I stopped. It turned round when I turned round. It was obvious to me that whoever was tailing me wanted me to know I was being tailed. Later that day, I had a small triumph. I was driving up a winding mountain road approaching a very long roadworks with single-lane traffic controlled by a guy with a stop-go sign. Just as I arrived, he swiveled his sign to stop, allowing me through but holding up my shadow. Around a bend, I pulled off the road into a clump of trees and waited. 10 minutes later, the red sports car scorched through in a cloud of dust, obviously chasing after me. I never saw it again. Back in England, strange things started happening. 2 CID detectives showed up on the doorstep of my home in Buckinghamshire and began questioning me about my whereabouts on a certain day 2 years earlier. It transpired they had had an anonymous tip-off that I was implicated in an unsolved axe murder in the car park of a South London pub. A few weeks later, I was accused of involvement in an arson attack on an aircraft factory in Wiltshire. Meanwhile, friends from across the United States and Europe were calling to warn me that they had visits from American private investigators, most of them going under the name of Eugene Ingram, apparently intent on digging up dirt about me. Late one night, I was telephoned by a man who had been my neighbour in London more than 10 years previously. He had had a visit from Ingram inquiring about me and had had the presence of mind to find out where Mr. Ingram was staying, a cheap hotel in West London. I called his hotel and asked to be put through to his room. When he picked up, I said, "This is Russell Miller. I understand you have been making inquiries about me. Well, here I am. What is it you want to know? Ask away." He seemed rather at a loss how to respond. I asked him what exactly he was hoping to achieve snooping around my friends and neighbours. There was a pause, and then he said, "We know your wife was born in East Germany. We think you killed Dean Reed." I almost dropped the telephone. I was staggered to learn he had discovered my wife's birthplace, but even more staggered to think that this fact now seemed to connect me to the tragic death of Dean Reed. Reed was an American actor, singer and left-wing activist who had defected to East Germany in 1973. In the summer of 1986, I arranged to interview Reed in East Berlin for a profile in the Sunday Times magazine. When I arrived in West Berlin, I was told on the telephone by his manager there was a problem, but I should call back in an hour. I called back and kept calling through the weekend and was given various stories why Dean could not do the interview. In the end, I gave up and returned to London. The reason Dean Reed could not do the interview was because he was dead. Several days later, it was reported that he had been found drowned in Zeutner Lake near his home on Friday, June 13, 1986.